I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Well, I hate to tell you, this is not Monday. We decided to go ahead and run this as a Mail Call Mondays because I wanted to go ahead and give you guys something in our Mail Call Mondays format and lineup to kind of fill the gap. You guys have been incredibly supportive of me while we've gone through some changes here at home. My job has changed my shift, which of course that changes my sleep schedule, that changes my outside of work schedule, and it's just changed a lot of stuff around here. That occurred right before we went to K&M to shoot the K&M Precision Rifle Series match. So that has kind of had a cascading effect on me being able to get videos out for you guys. First of all, I want to apologize for that, but again, I want to thank you guys for being so supportive of it. Those of you who didn't know that I was going through this stuff, thanks for sending me messages asking me if I was okay. That means a lot that you guys are worried about my personal well-being outside of the internet and outside of the YouTube community. That being said, what I want to do for you guys today is I want to run through the K&M Precision PRS match, talk about the different stages, how I did on the different stages, and what I would do differently. The K&M match was May 24th and 25th. We actually went down a couple of days early because the Friday before the match was held on Saturday and Sunday. The Friday before the match, K&M held what they call a tune-up. This is a really awesome opportunity to go down and shoot in the same venue that the match will be held at. And now, we didn't get to shoot the stages for the match because that would be a little bit dirty for those guys that didn't get down to shoot the tune-up. But we got to shoot in the same ranges. We got to shoot off of some of the same obstacles that they had out there. So for those of us that can't get down to K&M and shoot on a regular basis, it was nice to go down and warm up on those obstacles, on the different props that they had, to be able to get a feel for things before we were just kind of thrown into it. It kind of equalizes out that advantage that the home team guys get shooting these kind of PRS matches. So we went down, we actually went down on Thursday, we shot the tune-up on Friday, and then we shot the match Saturday and Sunday. Sunday, the rest of our group, they punched out and headed back here to southern Indiana, and I linked up with my family and headed down for a week vacation at Walt Disney World. So that was kind of why I wasn't able to get a whole lot of stuff out to you guys right then, and unfortunately, after we got back here, the day after we arrived back home, I had to go back to work on my new third shift schedule, and so that kind of put a kink in things there. So again, I want to apologize for taking so long to get this stuff out to you guys. Now, for those of you guys that are wondering, the rifle that's sitting in front of me right now, this is the rifle that I took down to K&M and shot. We have done some pretty extensive overviews of the rifle previous to this. We were doing some of that stuff in the Mail Call Mondays building up to the match. But for those of you that missed that, I'm going to run over the setup real quick here. First of all, the heart of this system is a Remington 700 short action. It's just a basic Remington 700 receiver. The barrel is a Bartlein barrel. It is a 1-in-8 twist, and it started life as a Remington Varmint Contour blank. I had it cut and threaded at 24 inches. Southern Indiana Precision did the work, cutting and threading the barrel, installing it, and chambering it on this action. They also went through and they tuned the action, cleaned it up, made sure all the surfaces were true to the bore and the axis of the receiver. So everything worked out really well there. The only issue that I had with the action and the barrel is it had some weak ejection from time to time. So once in a great while, I would catch a case when I go to slam the bolt back closed, and I'd have to reach in there and flip it out. This is actually a pretty common malady with factory Remington receivers. So once you learn to understand that it occurs when you slam that bolt forward, if it doesn't go in a battery, you know to flick the case out and then go on with life. That is nothing against Southern Indiana Precision. It happens. What I actually need to do, you only know that it's there once you've fired quite a few rounds through it. What I just simply need to do is go in and polish the ejector a little bit. I may need to cut a coil off of the ejector spring, and that should take care of that and allow that extractor to hang onto that case a little bit further until it can throw it clear. Not a big deal there. The accuracy of this rifle was absolutely excellent, and we knew that going into it because the workup, because we spent quite a bit of time putting rounds down the barrel before we took it to the match. When we actually got to K&M, I think I had about 180 to 190 rounds through the tube before we shot it there. So I really knew what to expect as far as accuracy. Now the chassis system that we have it sitting in is a Generation 4 Whiskey 3 chassis system from Kinetic Research Group. This is an absolutely excellent chassis system that offers you a lot of options. It is a folding chassis, and the comb and the buttstock are adjustable. You can adjust the height of the butt pad as well, so you can really get it dialed in for your body type. I am running the KRG spigot mount up here. This is an additional piece that you add on, and that was so I could move the sling mounting point a little bit further forward, and I could move the bipod further forward. The bipod is a Harris BRMS 6-9 bipod with an Alamo 4-star D-lock conversion on it and a Alamo 4-star Sarge knob on it. This really allows us to go quick on, quick off with the bipod should we need to do so. I've got a rail back here so I can run the bipod in a mid position if I needed to do so, which I didn't on this. But it gives me a couple of different options there. We also have a barrier stop here on the bottom of the chassis. This is also a KRG piece. It's an optional accessory, and that really allows us to get a good purchase on a barricade and really load that rifle into it. Really nice component there. Does utilize the AICS magazine system, so we're running 10-round AICS magazines. Most of the time we can run 5 rounds if we need. The magazine release worked perfectly, held the magazines when we needed them, easy to drop them when we needed to do a mag change. Up here on top, I'm sure a lot of you guys recognize the Nightforce scope up here. This is a Nightforce Beast. That stands for Best Example of Advanced Scope Technology, and it is a 5 to 25 power scope. We got a little bit of time with it before we went out to K&M. We shot it down in the Woody's match, their DM match down in North Carolina. So I was confident the scope was going to work for us for the PRS match. It did. It worked absolutely fine. There are some pluses and minuses to this optic, and we will talk about that when we do the full optic review, because it's a little bit outside of the scope of this discussion of this match. But it worked great. It was set in a Nightforce Unimount, and that's attached to the top of the receiver by a Weaver Picatinny tactical mount, and it is a 0 MOA base. And I know I preached go with a 20 MOA base before. With this optic and any optic that I plan on mounting on this rifle, 0 MOA base will give me the option to either go with a 20 MOA mount or a 0 MOA mount. If you go with a 20 MOA base and you try to drop a 20 MOA mount on it, you can have some problems. So that's the reason I went with a flat base, and any optic I'm going to put on here is going to have enough elevation for the 260 to get it out to a mile if I have the great desire to shoot it to that distance. The trigger in here is a factory Remington pre-2006 trigger. It's been tuned down to about 2.5 pounds. So that overall, and forget the bolt handle. This is a PTG bolt handle that Isaac at Southern Indiana Precision welded on. He TIG welded it on and timed it so that it does actually provide some extraction cam when you lift it. And this is just a standard bolt knob threaded on here to the PTG lever. And that's about it for the rifle itself. Well, enough yakking about that. Let's talk about the stages there at K&M. Now, K&M is an absolute fantastic facility, lots of different ranges to shoot on, lots of different props, and K&M went above and beyond, and they actually set up 20 stages for a 2-day match. We shot 12 on the first day, we shot 8 on the second day. 20 stages is a phenomenal amount of stages to shoot at a precision rifle match like this. What they did really is just kept us moving. There was very little downtime, and what downtime there was, we were actually pretty thankful for, because it gave us time to check over our gear, make sure our ammo was set up, load magazines, that kind of stuff. So the little bit of downtime you had, you really used to great effect. We also had a lunch break on both days, and Bartlein Barrels was kind enough to furnish the boxed lunches that we got on both days, and they were absolutely excellent quality. They were basically cold cut sandwiches, some chips, some Gatorade in there, but the quality of the sandwiches was great. They were like mini subs. Really, really good, and I want to thank Bartlein for sponsoring that for us. It was a great time to relax, to talk with other competitors, to get some chow, and to reset your mindset for the next stage you had to go on. Now, as soon as we got down to K&M and got in there, we had actually registered the day before during the tune-up, so on the first day of the match, all we had to do was show up, unpack our gear, and stand by and wait to be broken up into squads. Once we were broken up into squads, we were sent to different areas of the range. That way things could keep moving, different squads could shoot on different stages all at the same time, which is just pretty much a standard method to keep things moving and to get guys through all the stages very quickly. My squad, as I go through these, I'm going to go through them in the order that my squad shot them. If you were at K&M and you shot them, you probably shot them in a different order than what I'm going to go through unless you were on my squad. It just helps me keep it straight in my brain. If you were on my squad and you noticed that I reversed one or two, it's because it was about a week later when I sat down and wrote out the order that I shot these in. So I may have goofed that up just a little bit, but bear with me if that's the case. So the first stage that we went ahead and shot was titled the Big Dog Mammal Massacre, and it was sponsored by Big Dog Steel, and the winner of this stage actually received a target package from Big Dog Steel, which is awesome. We shoot Big Dog Steel at our local match, as well as several different steel targets from other manufacturers, and they always perform really well for us. I'll go ahead and read you the stage briefing as it's laid out in the book, and then we'll talk about my experiences on it. One point real quick on the book. We got this when we registered at the tune-up the day before. If you weren't at the tune-up, if you registered at the match, then you got this in your shooter's package as soon as you registered at the match. And it goes through here and it has stage descriptions for each and every stage. And on any known distance targets that you're going to engage, it already has the distances of the targets written out in here, which was awesome because the night before we sat down and we made out cheat sheets and we put our dope in, and I made out cards for my wrist coach that had everything that I needed to shoot that stage in it, so I didn't have to carry around the book or fish the book out if I didn't want to. I could just flip to that card in my wrist coach, and I already had the dope lined out, and I averaged dope for a 90-degree day, because both days that we were shooting were 90 degrees, and it was only a little bit cooler in the morning and only a little bit hotter in the late afternoon. So it's nice to get the book and be able to write all that stuff down. Now, the stage briefing, as I read it here, is what we were briefed by the RO at the beginning of the stage, and then he adds a little bit of his commentary on after that for whatever he helps or he thinks will help us shoot the stage more efficiently. The stage briefing in the book says, engage 7 rounds from the prone position on command, engage 5 prairie dog reactive targets and 2 coyote targets. Targets must be engaged from closest to furthest. Engage each target with 1 round only. Now, the stage setup, there was a rack with a close group of prairie dogs, and there were 2 dogs on that rack, and that was at 347 yards. Then there was a far group of prairie dogs that had 3 prairie dogs on it, and that was 403 yards. There was a close coyote at 453 yards and a far coyote at 601 yards. The prairie dogs were life-size, the coyotes were half-size coyotes, and you got 3 points for each prairie dog, 2 points for each coyote. Now, when we read out the stage description, and when the RO read the stage description, the understanding was that if you missed a target, you could go on to the next target. The briefing that we got from the RO, he stated that was not correct, that you had to stay on the target until you made a hit. This caused a little bit of a problem because our group, our first squad, was the only ones that were briefed that we had to stay on the targets. Everyone else was allowed to skip targets if they missed them. This is really a big point for me. I understand, later looking at it, I think the RO misunderstood the directions for this stage and confused them with a later stage that we were going to shoot from the exact same tower in the exact same place that was very similar. And that one you had to stay on a target until you made a hit before you moved to the next target. So he briefed us we had to stay on the target. This caused some problems with some shooters and cost other shooters some points. If you do that and you're a match director and that gets screwed up, my suggestion to you is whatever the first set of rules you briefed were, unless there's a safety concern, stay with that set of rules for the entire squad. Because if we were briefed that we couldn't move to the next target until we actually got a hit on the first target, then if you told all the other squads that, then it would be the same difficulty level for everyone that shot the stage. If you tell us one thing and you tell the next squad something different, that may change the difficulty level of it for them, and it may award them an unfair advantage. So this kind of goofed things up. It caused a couple of shooters to lose some points. I don't know that this caused me to lose any points. I zeroed this stage out because for whatever reason I couldn't get a hit on that first prairie dog. It still baffles me. I'm not sure exactly why that occurred. The prairie dogs were fairly small. We're talking almost 2 inches, maybe a little over 2 inches wide at their widest point. So they're still sub-MOA targets at the range that we were at, the closest range that we were shooting them at, and they get just smaller going out from there. So I zeroed out the stage. There's a possibility that I may have gotten a couple of points shooting on a coyote further out because it was a larger target, and I don't know at this point, but I really wish something would have been done to address the inconsistency in the rules between the two. So I zeroed this stage out. It kind of bummed me because it was a fairly simple stage. You were laying down on top of a tower, you were prone, you could bag the rear of your rifle, you're shooting off a bipod, you're in a really stable position, and I just really goofed it up. I even put a couple of rounds down into the base of the target because the big dog targets, they have a square armor plate at the bottom of them to protect the spring mechanism and protect the mounting point for the post. But it makes a really nice spot to hit on freshly painted orange steel to be able to see where your impact's going, and it's much larger than that little prairie dog. So I did send a couple rounds into the base to try to get an idea of if the wind was catching me and blowing me off or what was going on. No big deal, zeroed that stage out, walked off of it, not feeling real great about my performance, but ready to move on to the next one. The next stage that we shot was titled Bartlein's Speed Limits, and it was sponsored by Bartlein Barrels, and the shooter that won this stage actually would take home a Bartlein barrel. Now, it is a very interesting way that they set the stage up. It's almost like Know Your Limits, but it's more of a test your limits, and I'll read you the stage briefing here. It says, engage up to 10 rounds from the prone position. On command, establish a prone firing position and engage targets starting from largest to smallest on the TYL target rack. Shooters must engage and hit each target with 1 round starting from largest to smallest. You must hit each desired target in succession before moving to the next smaller target. If you miss, you lose all points and must start over and re-engage starting with the largest to smallest target. Stop when you want, but each shooter only has a total of 10 rounds to acquire points. Now this on this stage, it's basically like a lot of know your limits setups that we've seen before. You had 5 targets which started target size 14 inches, 12 inches, 10, 8, and then 6. And they were set at 465 yards. And this is information you're all given ahead of time. The largest target was worth half a point, and they get more valuable from there. The next one was worth 1, then 1.5, then 2, and then 3 for the smallest target. You're given 1 minute to prepare, to get into position, get everything ready to go as a group. And then they go down the line, and each shooter has 1 minute to complete the stage. Now, whoever shot the stage clean in the lowest amount of time won the stage. So they were timing each shooter as they went. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't in the running for the top end, so they didn't give me my time, and I didn't write it down in here. If I remember right, the top shooter shot it in 8 seconds, and he was running a bolt gun, and he was just a machine. He ran it faster than a lot of the gas guns out there and hit every target on his first shot. Now, I came off of a really cruddy performance on the first stage, so I wanted to make sure that I shot this one clean and did everything I needed to do. So I took my time shooting it, and the points were more important than the time, because if you finished it really fast, you didn't get any more points than if you finished it with all your time. You just weren't in the running for the barrel. And granted, after this match, a new barrel would be a really good idea, but you know, that wasn't to be. So I went ahead and shot it, and I shot it clean. I went ahead and I hit each of the targets with my first shot, no problem at all. Got to the end of it, felt really good, and then watched these other guys just absolutely smoke the targets. And I knew I wasn't going to do any better than that, so it wasn't a big deal. But I came off of that with 8 points. And thank the gods there was no wind when I shot the thing. So I had no problem going through. I was hitting those targets dead center. So I hit the last one with absolute confidence. I like the fact on this stage that it's a test your limits, not a know your limits. So if you miss, you zero out your points. But as long as you have time left and rounds in your magazine, you can go back and collect some points. So the strategy on this stage would be to go through, hit the easy targets quickly, and then take your time hitting the smaller targets. And on this, I really don't see, you know, since you have 5 targets and you have 10 rounds, I really don't see any reason that you would stop before trying to engage that 6-inch circle at 465 yards. It's still almost a minute-and-a-half target, so it should be a fairly easy target for these level of weapon systems. So going down and shooting all the way to the end and shooting at that last target really is the strategy that you want to use, because even if you miss on the absolute last target and you zero out, you still have 5 rounds left in your magazine, and you should still have plenty of time. It was a minute. A minute to fire 10 rounds is a lot of time. So you should have been able to, if you zeroed it out, to go back and gain some points back again. You may want to not try for that last 1 or 2 targets if you zeroed it out the first time, but you can at least go back and hit that first 3 with no problem at all. So that's the strategy that I would use shooting this style. That's the strategy that I did use, and that's what I would use going forward on other stages. Really fun stage, but that kind of set the tone as we went on to where these stages were shot very fast. We kept these barrels pretty much smoking hot all day long. The only rest they got was when we got a rest at lunchtime. And even after that, because we're dealing with 90-degree temperatures out there, the barrel stayed almost uncomfortably hot the whole day. If you reached up and grabbed that barrel, it was pretty stinking warm. The next stage that we moved to after the Bartlein speed limits was called Loophole Sector of Fire. Now this is a really fun stage and a very technically challenging stage as well. I'll read you the stage description here. Engage 7 rounds from a hasty firing position. On command, establish a firing position using the provided support. Shooter must engage all targets visible from the loophole. Targets must be engaged from closest to furthest. Engage each target with 1 round only. Do not load magazine until in your first firing position. Bullet strikes on the loophole frame will result in an immediate stage DQ. Targets designated by visual recognition by the shooter. Distances are unknown. Target size varies and are partially exposed. Each hit's worth 1 point. You will be allowed 1 minute prep time and 1 minute to complete the stage. This was an unknown distance stage, and you were not allowed any means to gauge the distance of your target other than your scope reticle or your eyeball. You were not given time ahead of time to mill the targets and do any kind of range estimation. Everything was on the clock. They did allow you to go up and glass the stage, but you couldn't use any laser rangefinders or anything with a reticle in it. So really, range estimation's out the window. You have 1 minute to fire 7 rounds. So this really, the way I went about it was I went up there and I just visually observed where the targets were and guesstimated what the distances were. This is a stage where a flat shooting fast 6mm would do very well. Since I was shooting the 260, I still had some of that advantage of a flat shooting, a high velocity bullet. And that really helps out in these kind of situations. 308s don't do well in these because you can't get an exact range to target, and that steep ballistic curve of the 308 really hurts you on this. Now additionally, one of the skill factors that were tested in this stage is how to build a hasty firing position. The obstacle that you had to shoot off of was a traffic barricade like you would find out at an accident scene or out at a construction scene. They're the big plastic barricades that you fill with water. These were set up in kind of a U-shaped pattern, and then you had a wooden wall in front of you with a window cut in that wall and a thick lower sill on that window. The sill was set probably about 12 to 18 inches above the top of the barricade, and the barricade was set back a considerable distance from the window, the loophole, which required that in order to see all the targets you had to move from one side to the other side to get that sweep, that large field of view. Well, there were a lot of different ways that guys attacked this, and what I did on it was I grabbed my Everly stock pack, which was packed full of stuff that I needed to shoot the different stages, and I deployed my bipod to its full distance. I also went ahead and grabbed my pump pillow, the WeBad.com pump pillow, and we did a review on this on our website not too long ago, and I put this on my strong side arm. And by doing that, I was able to get up there, throw my ruck on the barricade, throw the bipod on top of the ruck. That gave me enough height to actually see through the barricade, and that got my bore considerably above the sill, so I didn't have to worry about clipping the sill with a bullet. With the WeBad bag on my elbow, I was able to get that elbow and plant it either on the side of the barricade, or I was able to tuck it up and get it on my rib cage and get a really nice tight position. That helped me get stable, and I went through and I ran the first 3 targets with no problem. The close targets I drilled pretty well. When I got out to the far targets, I expended my 4 rounds and really didn't see any impacts on the far targets. After we got done and we were able to kind of sit around and discuss what we thought the ranges were on it, I think it's pretty apparent that I had overestimated the range on them, and I was slinging bullets over the top of all the targets. So I didn't get a chance to see splash. I didn't get a chance to adjust off of that. Now going into this, really there is no way to do range estimation beforehand, and there's no way to do any kind of math on the fly. 1 minute is long enough to get accurate shots off. 1 minute is not long enough to range each target. The front set of targets were close enough that I really didn't have any problems just getting on them and drilling them. We were talking about basically head and shoulder size targets, so we had a lot of air or room for error close up, but as we push those targets out and the ballistic curves got greater and those angles expanded, you had to be considerably more accurate on it. If I had done some research on the H59 reticle in this scope before I went out, if I had a little bit more time to work with it, Horus has built in a speed shooting formula into this reticle that allows you to engage targets like that if you have a guesstimate on the target size. You can get the target in the reticle. If it matches up to a certain bracket in that reticle size, then it allows you to go down and throw on a coarse amount of elevation to try to hit the target. We haven't had time to get it out on this rifle and verify that that speed shooting formula will work with this rifle, or what the correction on the formula is for this rifle. But before we do the full review on the beast, we will be getting out and we will do that and let you know how the Horus speed shooting formula works for this and how it would have worked in the Loophole sector of fire stage. But other than that, it's just sheer guesstimation, and it's your skill to be able to look out there with your calibrated eyeball and figure out how far the targets were. I came off of that with 1 point, or with 3 points, 1 point for each target that I engaged, and I wasn't feeling too terrible about it. That was approximately half of the points available. It was only 7 points available overall, so wasn't too bad. Now, those first 3 stages of fire that we shot were down on what K&M calls their utility ranges. They are shorter ranges off to the side of the main pavilion. The next 2 stages were up on the main ranges. The first one was the 940-yard point target, and the next one was the transition from the pipe flange. Now, the 940-yard point target is exactly what it sounds like. This was a straight up shooting skill competition. There's no tricks, no having to build support positions. It was shot from the tower on the main range, and you shot prone, bipod front, and rear bag supported, or however else you wanted to support your rifle. I shot bipod and rear bag, and you basically just had to shoot a target at 940 yards. The stage briefing, or the stage briefing, is as follows. Engage 5 rounds from a prone position. On command, engage the 940-yard circle target with 5 rounds. Target is designated as C9 at 940 yards. Target's a 12-inch circle. First round hits are worth 3 points. Second and subsequent round hits are worth 2 points. 1 minute prep time and 45 seconds to complete the stage. So we're shooting at a 12-inch target at 940 yards. So it's not an incredibly difficult shot, but due to wind, due to shooting on an unfamiliar range, it is slightly difficult. The advantage that we had is when we went down and shot the tune-up, we didn't get to shoot the 940 because the tower is back behind the pavilion, and there were guys that were using the obstacles that were forward of the tower. So there was no way to shut down those obstacles and shoot from the tower. So we actually shot prone from several spots forward of the tower at the 840-yard line where the rest of the obstacles were at. And that allowed me to get some dope, get an idea of how the wind was flowing through the trees and around the berms and that we had down there. And it really gave me a great opportunity because looking at the data that I had inputted and used for the Kestrel, and looking at what I actually ended up with on my scope, there was about a 2/10 mil variance. I had to add 2/10 of a mil on my scope to get center mass impacts on that plate versus what my Kestrel was telling me. And that's not too strange. This rifle, before we actually took it to K&M, had never been out to 1,000 yards before, so I wasn't exactly sure what it would do out there. I knew what the electronic dope told me, but I had not shot true dope for this rifle at that range. So I noted that down in my notes, and when it was time to shoot this for score on match day, I knew that whatever the Kestrel came up with, I was more than likely going to need to add 2/10. I went ahead and added 2/10 on that. I got on the rifle. When it was my time to go, I let my first round go after gauging the wind. I was holding the left edge, and I was rewarded by seeing a nice impact on the target. Now with this scope dialed up to 25 power, you can see an impact on 940 yard steel fairly clear. I couldn't hear a whole lot because of the wind and because of the distance and because you've got chatter of other competitors, etc. But you could see the impact. On this stage, I actually had George Gardner spotting. He was the RO for that stage, and so I was rewarded when I cranked that first round out with hearing him bellow out impact, and we were good to go from there. So I got my full point value for my first round hit at 940 yards, and then I connected with 3 more hits after that. I think it was the second to last one I let fly, and that was just because I was overconfident. I was drilling the target, I was running it quickly, and I think I just got on the trigger a little bit too fast on that second to last one, and I watched it impact just off the right side of the plate. So a little irritated about that. Got back on, made that last shot count, and walked away from that with 9 out of the possible 11 points. So again, felt fairly good about that. I really liked that stage because it was just calm, relaxing, sit down. You had plenty of time because they had almost the whole squad online at the same time, and they were going down shooter by shooter. So you had plenty of time to relax, get your breathing down. We could dry fire before the actual firing shot. They allow us to dry fire in our prep time. But once the other shooters started firing, there was no more dry firing, and you actually had to lay very, very, very still. It was a wood deck up there, so any kind of movement, any kind of bouncing, thumping your feet, you could see it through your rifle scope, and it definitely translated to your reticle bouncing on the target. So as out of respect to your other shooters, you just lay dead still while other shooters were firing. And of course, you had a break to scratch your nose, move a little bit as they switched from one shooter to the next. So that was the 4th stage we fired. Now you'll notice that there's kind of a pattern developing here, that I would shoot one stage and just really bomb it, shoot another stage, do fairly good on it, shoot another stage, not so well. And this kind of persisted. The next stage that we shot was transition from the pipe flange. This one worried me a little bit to begin with because a pipe flange is not an obstacle or prop that I have shot off of before. And I'll throw some pictures up of the pipe flange because I'm not real good at describing it. It's basically a pipe with flanges to bolt onto other pipes on either side of it. It's fairly narrow, and it is set with the round side facing the target that you're going to engage. The problem here is that flange is fairly wide, and it comes to a crown in the center. So with your rifle, if you set the bipod and a rear bag at a normal height that you use shooting off a bench or shooting off prone, then your magazine would high center in the middle of the pipe flange. So you really had to crank things up and adjust things a little bit to shoot off the pipe flange. Additionally, you had to figure out something to do with your body that would not affect the sight picture or throw the rifle off, and you really needed to try to plant the rifle on the target or on the flange for this stage, because you were shooting several different targets and you were transitioning between targets. The range briefing for transition from the pipe flange goes like this. Engage 10 rounds from a hasty firing position. On command, move from the start position and establish a hasty firing position using the pipe flange for support. Engage 5 rounds at the circle target rack. Engage each circle only once. Engage from left to right on the circle target rack, whether you hit or miss. Once your 5 rounds are engaged at the target rack, transition to the mover and engage your last 5 rounds at the moving target. Do not load until you're in your firing position. Target rack is designated at B4 at 615 yards. Mover is designated as M2 at 600 yards. Targets are 12-inch circles, each hit worth 2 points. You will be allowed 1 minute prep time and 2 passes of the movers to complete the stage. First of all, I'll make a comment here on the target designations. K&M is great about letting you know what target you need to shoot at and marking the target. There are really large yellow target markers out there with numbers and letters on them that you can very easily see almost with the naked eye. You can definitely see with a magnified optic. So when you're shooting out there, it's really easy to get out there, scan, see which target you need to engage, and go for it. I don't know of any instances where a mid to top end competitor was shooting on the wrong target. There were some instances where newer competitors were shooting on the wrong targets, but they just didn't stop to see that yellow target marker before they got on the target. And you had plenty of time in your prep time to make sure you're oriented to which targets you needed to engage. The moving target, again, this is another advantage of going out for the tune-up because they did have the moving target running. We didn't get to shoot it at 600 yards. We did get to shoot it at 500 yards. So we were able to shoot the moving target out there and get on that. Now, we were not able to shoot off of the pipe flange. In fact, I didn't even see the pipe flange until the day of competition. Had I known it was back there hidden behind the tower, then I would have gone over there and at least set up and figured out how to get a really good position on it. Since I didn't, all I got to do was sit up there and watch a bunch of the other shooters go through first and see what kind of positions they were using, what kind of support they were using, and then tried to develop my own take on that on the fly. It really did not work out all that well for me. I only got one hit on the plate rack. I think I had a bad wind call on it because I have a real tendency when I'm pushed for time and I'm paying more attention about getting a solid position, I sometimes don't get a really good wind call. So, you know, I didn't make a good wind call on that. I finally got on the target, hit the plate rack, and you only had 2 passes of the movers, and that meant you had, when you started shooting, the mover would start. The mover actually start before you started shooting. That was your signal to go. When the mover got to one side, it would reverse directions. It would come back to the other side, and when it was gone, you were gone. Your time was up. You had to unload, show clear. So you really were kind of compressed for time. We got to shoot the movers ahead of time. I'm confident that had I actually gotten over to shoot the mover, I would have been good to go, but I was fighting the position. I didn't have a good position, so every time I fired, the rifle would recoil and I'd have to reacquire my targets. I had the bipod set too low. I was using too low of a rear support, so I just really had some issues there and didn't feel good about it at all. So that was the stage that I tanked after doing fairly well on the point target stage. This is where being a well-rounded shooter and being able to shoot off a variety of obstacles will really help you, because if you don't have the ability to practice on something before you go, you need to be able to have stuff stored in your brain about what it's similar to and what you've used in the past to great success and go. And honestly, I'd never shot on something that was similar to that before, so that was a failing in my training. It was something that I noted down, and it is something that I will resolve going forward. In every one of these matches, win or lose, place, whatever, you learn something. You learn something about yourself, you learn something about your gear, you learn something about the conditions and shooting high power rifles in general. So it's really important. Don't be intimidated and think, oh, I'm not going to do good, I'm going to get embarrassed. Go shoot matches, because it will make you a better shooter. You will get thrown into situations that you didn't even think to throw yourself into, and it really will help your development as a shooter. Because I came off of this match not doing all that well, coming back home with tons of ideas on how to modify my training to improve for the next time. So even if you zero out a stage, make copious notes in your notebook, in your log book, whatever you have at hand. I was scribbling in this book after every stage on what I screwed up, what I need to do better, and that will benefit you greatly, and it will definitely be worth the price of admission to these matches. So didn't do all that great on that one. After that stage was over, that was the midpoint of the day, and it was time for a lunch break there. As I mentioned earlier, Bartlein Barrels catered lunch for us. It was a box lunch from one of the local restaurants there in Baker, Florida. Excellent excellent subs. It was a really nice time to sit back, relax, be able to eat some chow, be able to recover, get your gear straightened out, and pound water. One thing that I forgot to mention is I'm from up here in southern Indiana. We are still transitioning into the summer. We hadn't quite hit our peak temperatures yet here, or our peak humidity. So I go down to Florida, and Baker, Florida in May is like southern Indiana in July. So we get about the same temperatures, we get about the same humidity, but I wasn't acclimated to it yet. So I went around with a camelback on my back the entire time, pounding water. I probably drank about 3 to 4 liters a day, and it really benefited me. Guys that didn't paid for it. So in situations like this, when you are exerting yourself and you're in high heat and humidity, it's absolutely paramount to drink water. I know you guys that have been in the military know this. It's a no-brainer. For guys that have not and haven't been forced to be outside exerting themselves in any kind of temperatures or humidity like that, you really need to keep pounding that water. If you don't, you may not feel thirsty because you're distracted, but you will definitely fatigue quicker, and you will pay for it later that night because that water loss becomes cumulative, and you'll wake up the next morning with just horrible headache. You'll feel hungover. It's just really a bad thing. So make sure you pound water on these kind of things. We ate lunch, had a great lunch, and then we went ahead and broke back up and picked up again in the afternoon stages. The first afternoon stage that my group shot was the KMW reaction to contact. Now the KMW reaction to contact was a really slick little stage, and I'll read the briefing here. Engage up to 10 rounds at 5 unknown distance targets. On command, move from the start position, establish a hasty firing position using the barricade for support. Engage the first target with 2 rounds only. Next, move to the next barricade and engage target with 2 rounds only. Lastly, move to the hood of the sedan and engage target 3, 4, and 5 with 2 rounds each. Shooters cannot skip targets or shoot them out of order. Each hit scores points. Targets must be detected and then range estimated by eyesight only. Targets will not be closer than 175 yards and will not be past 850 yards. Targets are 66% IPSC, first round hits or 3 points, second round hits or 2 points. You'll be allowed 1 minute prep time and 2 minutes and 30 seconds to engage with 10 shots. This again was another really fun stage, and if you were going to compare any of the match stages to something that you would find in a real-world military or law enforcement environment, this stage was probably it. You had to obtain hasty firing positions from each of 2 different barricades. There were traffic barricades like the Loophole sector fire, big plastic barricades. You had to shoot from each of those, and then you had to shoot across the hood of the car. Now this really, it's something that you could see encountering in the real world, where you have to run up, you have to get across the barricade real quick, shoot your targets, and you don't have time to range estimate or to laze or to mill your targets or to do any math. You just have to gas it and go. And again on this one, I just kind of swagged my distance. I did a little bit better on this series of targets, but I still only got about half of the allotted points. Again, knowing how to use the speed shooting formula in the Horus reticle may have allowed me to do a little bit better on this. There were a couple other shooters that had some tricks up their own sleeve, but for me, I just kind of guessed on what the range was to the targets. I managed to come away with 12 points. I got 2 first round hits, 3 second round hits. I was able to shoot and see impacts for a couple of them in the scope and make adjustments based on that, and that kind of helped me out a little bit. On this one too, the stage winner, the shooter with the fastest time and highest score, won a rifle stock from KMW. It was actually a KMW Sentinel stock. So Terry Cross was awesome in sending that out and sponsoring that stage. That is a very nice rifle stock. It's a very unique looking stock. So somebody walked away from that with a really awesome rifle stock. 12 points, I wasn't too unhappy about it because, again, this is something that I don't do in my training at home. It's fairly easy to go out and set up range estimation drills where you have unknown targets. You can go out into a farmer's field, you can go out onto a long straight road and just drop a target on the side of the road, sit back, mill the target, and do your range estimation. The problem is, the way this is set up, you really need to shoot, and you need to be able to shoot and quickly adjust off of those impacts to get your correct hits. And that requires shooting on an unfamiliar range. It doesn't really do you any good to take this out and go shoot this on your home range where you already know the distance of all the landmarks. You may have berms out there that are already set at preset distances, and you can just eyeball those and get a really good idea of what the distance was. There may have been some guys out there that had some home team advantage because where the targets were set at, there were, I don't want to say unique terrain features, but there were terrain features that you could use to guesstimate what the distance was if you shot on a regular basis. Had I known what ranges these things were going to be done on, then I might have gone ahead and got a satellite overhead of K&M and plotted yard lines on the satellite overhead and given me a little bit better idea. But for the actual training, you need to be able to try to get out somewhere that your eye can't gauge the distance off of terrain landmarks, and to be able to either use a rifle scope or use just eyeball range estimation. Get your shots and then correct if you have a miss and get on target and get that second round hit in the target as quickly as you possibly can. So again, that was another training note for me. It's another thing that I need to try to set up back here to improve my skills as far as that goes. Came off that with 12 points, not feeling bad about it, and then we moved on to the next stage of fire. The next stage of fire was the K&M Precision stage. It was kind of interesting. It was engage up to 10 rounds from the prone position on command, engage and hit 6 K&M targets from closest to furthest, and these are actual targets that are in the shape of the K&M logo. Each target must be hit before moving to the next target. Shooters may not repeat previously hit engagements for points. If all 6 targets are successfully engaged, the shooter has not used the 10 authorized rounds. The remaining rounds may be engaged at the bonus target, a 4-inch target to the right of target number 6. Do not load until you are in your firing position. Now, when I mentioned the Mammal Massacre stage at the beginning of our discussion here, I think this is the one that the RO confused the rules for. On the Mammal Massacre, you did not have to make a hit before you went on. On the K&M Precision stage, you had to make a hit before you could move to the next target. So I can see how the confusion was there because they were shot from the same wooden tower in the same place. They were just shot down a different lane of the same range. Now the targets for this setup, target range and sizes were target 1 was 282 yards and it was a 5-inch target. Target 2 was a 348 yard target and it was 6 inches. Target 3 at 396 yards and 7 inches. Target 4 at 574 yards and 8 inches. Target 5 at 640 yards and 9 inches. Target 6 at 703 yards and 10 inches. And at 703 yards, the bonus target was off to the side of it, and it was a 4-inch target there. So you're looking at about a half MOA target for that bonus target. This stage was, again, a pretty simple stage in execution. There was nothing crazy. You didn't have to build any specific positions. You didn't have to run. You didn't have to do anything on the move. It was simply set up prone, bag in the back of your rifle, prone on the top of a tower, and just gas on, and it was just simply a test of your precision and the precision of your rifle system. The first round hits, I should say your accuracy and the precision of your rifle system. First round hits were worth 3 points. Second round and subsequent round hits were worth 2 points. So if you hit it on the first shot, you got 3 points. If you missed and got it on the second, then it was only worth 2 points. Bonus hits were worth 1 point. You have 1 minute prep time as a group, so you got to lay down there, look down range, get everything done, and then individually you had 2 minutes to complete the stage. So 2 minutes to shoot 10 rounds is really not that bad, but obviously the difficulty of the targets started going up. They were all over 1 minute angle, but you did have some wind going in there, and some of the targets were set up in positions. They were all set on top of fence posts, T-post type stakes. So if you missed, sometimes it was difficult to spot where the hit was, or where the miss went by the target. I actually did fairly decent on this. I got 6 first round hits, and I managed to go through. I hit all the targets and got on the bonus and got 1 hit on the bonus. I ended up expending a couple of rounds, one into the fence post. Didn't get each one of the bonus hits, which I would have liked, but rolling away with 19 out of 22 points, I was feeling pretty good about that stage. I was feeling good about the way the rifle was working. I was actually feeling good once for my performance, because you did have to look downrange, you did have to make a wind call, and you did have to run with that. So again, not really all that difficult. You were on an elevated position, so you did have to make sure that you weren't moving and you weren't thumping around and screwing your buddies up there. Everybody had to be nice and calm and not make a lot of movement while the other guys were shooting. But when it was your time to go, it was a fairly easy shooting problem to execute. You just had to make sure that you obeyed the fundamentals, you made sure you make a good wind call, and made sure that you had your dope dialed in correctly. And for this stage, I actually did dial everything on the scope. I didn't find that the little +1 MRAD flipper down here caused me any problems. You just have to be cognizant that it's there and which way you have it dialed when you're going through and you're adding or removing dope from the scope. After we got done at the K&M Precision stage, we came back off the tower and we went over to the 100-yard range, and we had 2 paper stages. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I absolutely hate paper stages. For some reason, I just do not do well at them. I can come sit on my home range and I can sit down and I can punch holes in grouping targets. I can punch holes in 0 targets, no problem. When I shoot paper stages at matches, something climbs into my head and I just really have problems with it. I much prefer shooting steel, but everybody likes to throw those paper stages in. The first paper stage that we shot was the AccuShot stage, and the briefing says engage 1 round from the prone position on command, engage 1 round at the AccuShot target. Target is designated by shooter number at 100 yards. Target size is the black ace of spades, which is this little guy here. It actually is a standard playing card size. A hit inside the 1 MOA crosshair is worth 3 points. A hit inside the black is worth 1 point. You'll be allowed 1 minute prep time as a group and 1 minute to complete the stage. And unfortunately, that 1 minute to complete the stage was also as a group. Now, I've shot these before. We came off of Woody's, and we actually shot one of them at Woody's. This is the target from Woody's here. And this is my target card from K&M. About a little less than 1/4 inch off the center crosshairs. And as I said, Southern Indiana Precision builds an extremely accurate and precise rifle. So there we are. This wasn't even close to winning the stage. Whoever got closest to the center crosshair won a gift certificate from B&T Industries, the makers of the AccuShot monopod and the excellent Atlas bipod. That wasn't good enough. The winner actually center punched it. I mean, it almost looked like if you took a hole punch and lined it up perfectly and punched out the center. It was absolutely phenomenal to look at. So not too bad on that, but it was only 3 points for this shot. So even if you totally blew it, you only lost 3 points, which, judging by the other stages, 3 points can be lost in the noise. The only place that 3 points really mattered was if you were in the top 10. Then 3 points can change your placing there. But for the rest of us, 3 points was no big deal. I was happy to walk away from that, though. A couple of tips for this stage. First of all, everybody was put online at the same time. Everybody had their prep time at the same time, which was fine. But then everybody had to shoot at the same time. And there are a lot of guys out there that this will cause them to blow the shot. It's caused me to blow shots before. So what I figured out is when you're getting ready and they say shooters ready, stand by. When they say it's time to open fire, whatever the command is, go, targets, fire, etc., you're going to hear a volley fire. You're going to hear a lot of guys light up right as soon as they say go, because they're trying to use all their time. That's great if you have multiple engagements. If you just have one shot to fire, there's no reason to fire on that initial command. So what I will generally do is when they say fire, I'll let that first volley go. I'll make sure I'm following my breathing. I'm making sure everything else is lined up, that I don't have any stress on the rifle, that I'm not pushing, pulling, doing any of that nonsense. I'll let a couple of seconds go by, a couple of other guys crank off. Ideally, the guys on either side of me, I want them to go ahead and fire. Then when I think that I've got a good lull in things, that's when I'll go ahead and fire my round. That way I'm doing it on my own command. I'm not jumping, because when you jump at that start signal, there's a tendency to jerk the trigger. We saw that a lot downrange. All the aces were pinned up downrange at the same time with a target number underneath them. So you could go down, you could scan with your scope while you had time and look down and see how many missed the whole ace. And I think a lot of it was because of that volley fire problem. So don't get in a rush. You got 1 minute to make one shot. Make it count. Make sure that you're relaxed. Make sure you're firing it on your time, and make sure you go through your mental checklist and execute the fundamentals appropriately. Make sure your breathing's correct. Make sure you're straight behind the rifle. Make sure you get a good trigger pull. And that will give you the best chance of making a hit on that. Now, once we got done with that, we went ahead and stood up, left our rifles in place, and then we went into the K&M Know Your Limits. This was a standard Know Your Limits stage, so if you missed the target, you zeroed out. The stage briefing was engage up to 4 rounds from the prone position. On command, engage up to 4 rounds at the K&M KYL paper. Shooters must engage and hit each target with one round starting from largest to smallest. Shooters must hit each designated target before moving to the next smaller target. Shooters may stop when they want and keep points acquired, but a miss results in the loss of all points and the stage is over. The target sizes were 1.25 inches for the largest, 1 inch, then 0.75, then 0.5, and the largest target's worth 0.5, the smallest target was worth 3, and you have 1 minute and 30 seconds to complete the stage. I hosed this one. I center punched the first target, and for whatever reason, I shanked the second one, threw it right off the paper, and I was done. Looking down range, there were a lot of guys that did that, but it kind of kept my consistency going, where I'd blow a stage, do good, blow another stage. So I did good on the AccuShot stage and blew the Know Your Limit stage. It was worth 6.5 points total if you shot them all. So again, not a massive amount of points to lose, but at this point I was losing too many points all across the board, so I didn't want to lose any more. After our paper stage was done, we went over to one of the last stages that we shot on the utility ranges for the day, and that was the Precision Tactical Arms Run and Gun. This stage, I'm not going to read the stage briefing because it is fairly in-depth and fairly long. Basically what we had to do is you had to start on the other side of a sewer culvert kind of deal, going through one of the berms. You had your magazine in hand, had your rifle in hand. I actually was running a magazine pouch, tab gear mag pouch on my side. So I started with my magazine in there because you had to have the rifle unloaded until you got into position. You ran through the culvert, you ran up to a table that had a barricade set in front of it. On that table was a modified Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm provided by Precision Tactical Arms. It was a custom pistol. Had a lot of work done to it, grip stippling, light and slide, all kinds of stuff. Different trigger installed in it. You had to grab that handgun and you had your choice of a large IPSC target or a small 12-inch plate, I believe it was. Yeah, a small 12-inch plate further away, and you could choose which one you wanted to engage, and you had to put 5 rounds into either the large plate or the small plate. The close pistol plate was worth 1 point. The far was worth 2 points. So easy way to pick up 4 points right off the bat if you put your 4 rounds into the far versus the close one. And then you had a paper target. You had to put 1 shot into the paper target. Now, if you made your shot on the paper target, you were entered into a drawing for the handgun that you were shooting for that stage. I went ahead, and because I'm confident in my pistol skills, I decided I was going to shoot the far target. So I ran up there, grabbed the handgun, slapped the magazine into it, chambered the round, went to town, fired 1 shot, 2 shots, and then the handgun jammed. The slide failed to go back into battery. I'm used to shooting Glocks. It's an unfamiliar handgun, and they're yelling at me just to slap the back of the slide, which is not what I do if I have a failure to fire. I'm not used to slapping the back of the slide. If I have a failure to fire, then slap the magazine, rip the slide, and go to work. So I went ahead and slapped the slide like they're telling me to do, fired again, another failure to go into battery. It was not feeding the cartridge all the way into the handgun. We've seen this before in matches where they want to use a house gun, and that house gun sees a ton of rounds throughout the day, and maybe it's not the most reliable house gun on the face of the planet, or they're providing ammunition that is subpar. In this case, they were blaming the ammunition. It was Wolf steel-cased ammo. I don't know what kind of barrel they had in the gun. I don't know if maybe it was a tighter chamber and that was causing problems, or if it was just dirty and had an underpowered spring in it. But whichever the case, that pissed me off just slightly, because this is a tactical rifle match. I'm bringing very, very expensive rifle equipment to come shoot the match, and I'm going to get down points on a stage because of a pistol that wasn't in my control, not functioning correctly. So that's one of those little points that irritates you slightly. I got done shooting the pistol stage, dropped the pistol, ran up the ramp to a window barricade that they had set up. Now, there were 2 target sets downrange. One was at 313 yards, and that was a 50% IPSC and a 4-inch popper, and one was at 420 yards, which was a 50% IPSC and a 4-inch popper. And the order of fire that you had to go in is you had to start prone next to the barricade, and you had to shoot the 4-inch popper at 313 yards. You then had to come up to the window, and through the window you had to shoot the 50% IPSC at 313 yards, then the 50% IPSC at 420 yards. You then had to go back prone, and you had to shoot the 4-inch popper again. You had to shoot 2 shots at each one of those targets for score. Now, once I got there, got on my gun, got in position and started shooting, I was making hits, but I timed out before I was able to get to my last position and engage the target. So stopped, unloaded, approached the RO, explained to him that I was having problems with the pistol, and that took way longer than it should have taken, and this in turn caused me to time out and not get my points with the rifle. He discussed it, yelled down at the guys that were running the pistol stage. They confirmed that it was an equipment malfunction. It was not my malfunction. He went ahead and made the call to allow me to shoot the stage again, which was the right call. They're not going to give you points for it, but the best situation is they can allow you to shoot again. Now, ideally, you want to shoot again after all the rest of the shooters in your squad have gone, because that gives you time to go back, relax, reload your magazines, hydrate, and get it straight in your mind before you go again, because a bad run can mess you up mentally. They made the call for me to go right away, so I had to haul butt back down to my pack, reload my magazines, get everything reset, make sure my scope was dialed back correctly, and get ready to go again. This time I ran it, the pistol functioned properly. I was able to get my pistol hits, ran up the hill, and I was able to actually accrue quite a few more points shooting from the barricade up there. And I came off that stage with 16 points out of the 25 total. Not a stellar performance, but satisfactory. Again, I really dislike house guns in precision rifle matches. If you want to have pistol stages, that's fine. Tell me you're going to have a pistol stage. I will bring my own handgun. I will run my own handgun and my own ammunition. That way, if there's a mechanical malfunction, if there's a failure, it's my fault because it was my equipment that I brought. It's just the same as if my bolt gun goes down during a match. I can't blame the match director if my bolt gun goes down while I'm shooting a match. That's on me. I should have brought better quality equipment, or I should have maintained my equipment better. So if you're gonna have a pistol stage, I really highly recommend having shooters bring their own handguns. There aren't a whole lot of us out here that can't beg, borrow, or find someone to supply a handgun to us to go shoot a match. If you are gonna shoot a house gun, make sure that thing is reliable. Make sure you're cleaning it as often as you can between stages, or at least spraying it down with CLP or something. Make sure that somebody is supplying you quality ammunition, because if you're screwing guys over on points because of a mechanical malfunction on something that they have no control over, that just really doesn't look good. It's not fun for them. So it's something to keep in mind for those of you guys that maybe like to mix pistol up in the stage. I would have liked to have seen the pistol be out of it totally, but it was a stage that was sponsored by Precision Tactical Arms, and they supplied the pistol, and the pistol was given away at the stage. So, you know, I understand how that came about. Interestingly enough, one of the guys in our group actually won the handgun, and I have a feeling that I will see that thing again at one of our local matches as a house gun. So we'll see how that goes. That was the last stage for the utility ranges. Next we moved up to the pavilion. We took a few minute break, and then they shot us back down to the 270 yard ranges. Now down at the 270 yard range, we had the last two stages of the day, and one of which I was very, very glad to see it was the last stage of the day for me. We had the choose your position stage and then the mini gap grinder. The choose your position stage was actually a kind of an interesting setup. I'll read you the stage briefing, but the stage didn't really go exactly the way the stage briefing says. The briefing says engage 5 rounds from an unsupported position. On command, move from the start position and establish a kneeling or seated position and engage 5 rounds at 6-inch targets. Shooter may not use bipods, shooting sticks, or allow their rifle to touch the clearance rope/stakes in any way. Do not load magazines until you're in your firing position. Target is designated by the RO at 223 yards. Target is a 6-inch circle, and each hit is worth 2 points. You'll be allowed 1 minute prep time and 1 minute and 45 seconds to complete the stage. Now, the clearance rope that you had to go over, there were 2 fence posts and a rope tied between them. The rope was in a high enough position that a standard low-seated position would not clear it. Your barrel would not be able to get over the rope. A high kneeling might get it, but you would be fairly unstable in a high kneeling. You couldn't get it with a low kneeling position. So it would have had to have been a high kneeling where you were supporting the rifle with pretty much your elbow on your knee, and that is really, really not a stable position. It would be iffy on if you were able to hit that 6-inch target at 223 yards. This is where the equipment race kicked into high gear, and you saw some really crazy stuff. Now, I sat back, I haven't shot K&M before, so I sat back and I watched what was being allowed. I've learned this through several other matches where I jumped the gun and didn't just stand back and watch, because sometimes it's not what the rules are, it's what they will allow you to get away with, and that was the case here. Because what we saw most often was guys walking up there with multiple shooting bags and multiple rest bags, building basically a pile of gear to rest the rifle on and shoot over top of it. And that's fine. The RO was allowing it, so that became the rule of the day. And when it was my turn to go, I grabbed my Everly stock bag. I went ahead and deployed my bipod to its full distance. I had my shooting bag on my arm, and I got a nice stable position with my bipod on top of my bag. That allowed me to get the muzzle above the rope, and it allowed me to go ahead and clean that stage. I went ahead and got all 5 rounds on target, so I walked away with 10 out of 10 points. Sometimes it's not about what you think the rules are. Sometimes it's about what you see other people being able to push and get away with. This is a game. If you're not pushing the limits of the rules on stages like this, you're not trying hard enough. There are guys that can call foul and say, oh, you'd never do that in the field. Well, this isn't the field. This is a game. And most of us are here to win the game. So keep your eyes open, watch what's going on around you, watch what the more experienced shooters are getting away with, and then utilize that to your advantage. I actually ended up loaning my bag and my shooting bag to another shooter who was there, because the Eberly stock has some internal stiffening in the back that allows it to be used a little bit more as support, like in stages like we are talking about here. His bag was more of a regular rucksack that was just squashed down, and it wouldn't allow him to get high enough. So I went ahead and left my bag there for him to use, and you know, he used it to great effect from what I understand. Now the next stage was the mini gap grinder, and I chose to shoot the choose your position first because I was able to just dump all my gear there at that position, and the mini gap grinder ended up, the end firing position was right next to the choose your position. So it was a little strategy on my part, dropping my stuff there, that way I didn't have to haul it back and haul it back again. So while he was using my bag to shoot this stage, I went over and shot the mini gap grinder. Now the mini gap grinder is sponsored by GA Precision, and one of their benefits to sponsoring this is if you completed this stage, if you shot all the target positions in the allotted time, then you were entered into a drawing for a GA Precision custom rifle, which is an awesome, awesome prize. That usually is what a first place finisher at a national level match would get as a prize. So to just have that as a drawing for completing a stage is pretty awesome. And at the point that I went through it on the first day, there were only 10% of shooters that were entered to get the rifle. So this caused a little bit of gaming, because the stage is a pretty grueling stage, and again, this is one that's got a really, really long briefing. But basically what you start out with is there were 4 crane boom sections. So the pipe welded monstrosities that you see that create a crane boom, these were disassembled sections, and they were laying out on the range. If you started at the first crane boom, your target, which was a 45% IPSC, was 280 yards away. Now we used the same target for each firing position from the crane booms. Each crane boom was 20 yards closer to the target. So you started at 280 yards, but at the next boom, you were 260 yards from the target. The next boom, you were 240 yards from the target, and etc. On the start signal, you had to run to the first crane boom, set up your position, and fire. And you had 2 shots. 2 shots from the first crane boom, 2 shots from the second, 2 shots from the third, 2 shots from the fourth, and you could shoot at any position on the crane boom. When I looked at it, I tried to pick positions that would give me the easiest path to the next shooting position, and I also tried to pick positions that were a consistent height, because the crane booms were kind of off center, and crane booms are larger on one end than they are on the other because they narrow down as they get to the tip of the boom. So it was kind of an in-between thing. I didn't want to have to run all the way around a boom to get to the next firing position. I wanted to just be able to duck around the corner, but I also wanted to try to make sure that I was not crunching down real low or had to be up real high. Now my strategy as far as equipment for this is I took my shooting bag here, my Weebad bag, and I folded the bipod up and I strapped this onto the fore end. So I've got this nice big cushy pillow, and I would just drop that onto the boom, and no matter if I got on one of the railings or off of it a little bit, I'd have a really nice steady position, and I could lock the buttstock into my shoulder with my support hand, drive the rifle into the crane boom and really stabilize it and get some good shots. And that worked to great effect because out of those first 8 shots, I made 7 hits. Now this is kind of where the gaming starts to creep in. After you made your first shots on the crane booms, you had to get up and run. It was probably 200 to 300 yards. You had to sprint 200 to 300 yards to the next series of shooting positions. And these were 5 different shooting positions, starting with a rooftop and the standard barricade, and then shooting off a spool underneath a truck, shooting off of the back of the truck, and then shooting off of a trailer. Since these positions were 300 yards away and you were limited to 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you really had to gas on to get from the booms to that position because you were going to eat up time shooting and moving on the booms. Some guys just decided they were going to burn through it, just throw their rounds down range as quickly as they could and sprint and do the same thing on the other firing positions just to fire out all their rounds and get entered for the rifle. My intent was to make my shots count and to get my points, specifically getting my points before the run, because each hit from the crane booms was worth 2 points, and that was the same as each hit from the later firing points after the run. So I made sure each of those hits count. I made my run as quick as I had the energy left to do so at the end of the firing day. I managed to get to the rooftop, fire. I made my hit off the rooftop. I managed to get over to the barricade and fire from the barricade. Just as I was pulling off the barricade and getting ready to move to the spool, which was the 3rd firing position there, I timed out and I was done. So I left without shooting on 3 different firing positions, which of course took me out of the entry for the raffle, but I still felt good about my finish. I came off of that with 18 out of 26 points on a very challenging stage. Now when I look back over it, there is one really good learning point, actually 2 if you count physical fitness. The first really good learning point is I'm fairly certain the only shot that I missed off of the crane booms was my last shot. And I know what happened there. I was shooting from the booms. When I got to that last position, I got a good hit. I was already thinking in my brain about breaking position and running when I touched off that last shot. So my brain was already running to the next position. It wasn't where I needed to be, and it wasn't concentrating on what I needed to do. And as a consequence, I think my follow-through really suffered, and I think it just caused me to shank that shot before I took off running to the next position. Now, physical fitness is the second point. Really, you have got to be in decent shape on these, not only to ward off fatigue through the long days, but when you have stages like this, you are really going to need to put out a max effort on the run to get there and stay underneath the time limit. Had I eked out an extra couple of seconds on the run, then I would have actually been able to make the next firing position and probably get at least one more hit out of that whole run. So, making sure that you're integrating physical fitness into your training program, and even possibly integrating some sprints and other physical activities at the range may help you out greatly. That was it for the first day. We got done, packed our stuff up, went back to the hotel, kicked back and relaxed. Key thing at the end of the day, everybody wants to go hang out, everybody wants to have fun. If you're there just as a simple social occasion, then yeah, that's great. If you're there to actually stay focused and to really be in the competition, then take that time to hydrate, get some food down you, relax, go through your notes, see if there's anything you need to fix on your gear, take care of your rifle, get everything set up for the next day, and pound water if you're working in the heat like we were. Make sure you replenish all that water that you've lost through the day. Get some Gatorade into you so you get those electrolytes back in, and then get some rack time, because morning always comes early for me. I will usually, when we're shooting these matches, I usually don't even need to set an alarm. I will be up before the alarm will go off just because I'm excited. I want to get at it the next day. So as a consequence of that, you need to go to bed earlier, you need to get some good sleep so you can be focused and well rested on the next day. That's it for day one. We're going to go ahead and take an intermission. I suggest you guys go ahead and do so as well. Okay, on day two, we showed up back at the range. Again, we were broken back up into our squads and sent out to our ranges. Interestingly enough, there were a couple of guys that did not hydrate. They didn't do what they needed to do, and they didn't show back up on day two. So I'm serious about it. Make sure that you're taking care of your body throughout the day, as well as taking care of your gun and the rest of your equipment. You need to make sure that you're able to make it in the next day and able to continue the match. The first stop for us on day two was back down at the utility ranges, and the stage was called Hoodlums on the Street. The range briefing is engage up to 10 rounds from hasty positions. On command, run from the base of the hill to a firing position on top of the pipe flange. Detect and engage 2 enemy head targets in or behind the sedan. Once successfully engaged, the shooter will move to the rock, detect and engage a head target behind a hostage in the open. Next, the shooter will detect and engage 3 enemy head targets in the SUV. Lastly, detect and engage the head target behind a hostage in the back tree line. Shooter must hit each target before moving to the next. Targets must be engaged and hit from closest to furthest. Shooter may not skip engagements. Hits on friendlies result in a deduction of 1 point. Friendly targets are marked with orange paint and are full-size IPSC targets. Do not load magazine until you're in your first position. Move with magazine in and bolt open and back for this stage. Gas guns move with weapon on safe. The targets for this, the sedan targets, were 272 yards, and that was 2 full-size head targets. The hostage was at 307 yards, and it was a full-size head target behind a orange IPSC target. The SUV was at 432 yards, which was 3 full-size head targets, and the hostage in the wood line was at 481 yards, and it was again a full-size head target behind a orange IPSC target. The hits in the targets on the vehicle were worth 2 points. Targets in the open were worth 3 points, and we had 1 minute prep time, 3 minutes and 30 seconds to complete the stage. Stage was worth 16 points overall. Here, pipe flange came back into play. I had known what I screwed up the first day on the pipe flange. I had made notes. I had decided, okay, I need to do this to correct it on the next day. So we came out here to this stage, and when it was my go, I ran up there, jumped on the pipe flange, knew just what I needed to do, dropped into a nice solid position, and started dinging targets. One of the things that you really need to be cognizant of on these kind of stages is, first of all, your muzzle position. When you are running from a firing point to another firing point, you need to be critically aware of where your barrel is pointing. Point it at a competitor, point it at a RO, point it at somebody that doesn't deserve it, and you are probably going to get disqualified from the stage, could get disqualified from the match. So what I like to do when I'm running from stage to stage is I will try to point that barrel straight up at the sky or as far up as I can get it when I'm running from point to point. That usually gives me the least chance of actually muzzling an RO, muzzling another person, or if I fall, jamming my barrel in the dirt. If you try to run with muzzle down, there's a really good chance you're going to muzzle all kinds of stuff, and when you go to bring that rifle back up in position, you got to be really careful where you're pointing it and that you don't jam it into an obstacle. Second point is, when you are done shooting at your first firing point, move. Don't wait, don't look around, don't try to figure out what's going on. You need to grab your stuff and you need to go. And then gas on from point A to point B. Don't take your time lollygagging around. This was only 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So you had to run down one berm, across the range, back up another berm, and then regain a solid firing position on the second one. So you really wanted to make sure that you were moving with a purpose. And first stage, back in the game on day two, and I shot 13 points out of 16 possible. The only target I didn't get is I expended all my rounds on the last target in the open and did not get a hit. So I did pretty good. Missed everything except the 480-yard head target, and managed to miss the head target and not hit the hostage. So that was a really important point. Although I left the first stage feeling pretty good, that was quickly dashed when I went over to the second stage. The second stage was K&M Shields. Now again, this was just a prone stage, bipod, rear bag, and it was just a straight up shooting skill stage. Engage up to 10 rounds from the prone position. On command, engage 5 shield targets. Shooter must engage and hit targets from closest to furthest and cannot skip targets. Each target must be hit before moving to the next target. You may not repeat previously hit engagements for points. The targets were as followed. 350 yards, you had a 6x3 inch target. 401 yards, a 7x4 inch target. 663 yards, an 8x5 inch target. 723 yards, a 12x6 inch target. 802 yards, a 14x7 inch target. Each hit is worth 3 points. You were given 1 minute prep time and 2 minutes to complete the stage. I blew this stage out my rear. Whatever happened, I still don't know. Usually if I really mess up a stage and I come off the stage and I can figure out why I messed up the stage, how I messed up the stage, I'm cool with it because I can note it down in my logbook. I can go back, I can practice, I can fix it. I just came off of a fairly challenging stage and almost maxed the stage out, only dropped 1 target, and then I come over to this stage, which should have been a fairly easy stage, a prone stage with 2 minutes to expend 10 rounds, so a fairly slow-paced stage, and I could not hit the first target, and that was a 350-yard target that was 6x3, so 2 MOA by 1 MOA, and it was hanging on a swing set from a piece of fire hose. I fired my first shot at the target, miss. No impact, no idea, because we had a tree line behind it, grass, green vegetation, so there was no puff of dirt, nothing to see. Fire another shot at it, miss. Fire a third shot at it, miss. I'm really paying attention to see if there's a wind that I'm not seeing. Nothing. Had no idea what was going on. So when what you're doing is not working, do something different. So I had already checked to make sure my dope was correct. My scope settings were correct. My position was solid. So I went ahead and fired 1 round, holding on the left edge of the target, thinking, well, maybe I have a left or right wind that I haven't seen. And there were left or right winds prevailing there for a while. Holding left edge, nothing. Held right edge, nothing. Held top edge of the target, nothing. Held bottom edge of the target, nothing. I was getting absolutely no impact, no idea. I went ahead and turned my scope power all the way up to 25. I dialed my parallax in so I was focused on the target absolutely perfectly. Got a really good position. Squeezed off a shot, nothing. No idea. I went ahead and expended the remainder of my ammunition and didn't get a single hit on a 350-yard 2 MOA by 1 MOA target. So I have no idea what happened on that stage. I got nothing. Now I know the scope didn't get knocked off kilter because I was hitting targets on the stage before that were fairly challenging targets from stable positions. So I really have no idea what happened, but walked off that one with a big fat 0. We finished that, walked on down to the next stage, which was the Copper Creek's bus ride. This was a really fun stage. Engage 6 rounds from a hasty firing position. On command, move from the start position inside the bus, which was a short bus, and engage 2 different IPSC targets from left to right with 1 round each. Shooter will engage their 2 shots from 3 designated windows in the same manner. Hit or miss, the shooter must change window positions. Do not load until you're in your first firing position. Move with bolt open and back during the stage. Gas guns will move with the weapon on safe. The targets were left target 403 yards, 45% IPSC. The right target was 374 yards and 45% IPSC. Each targets were 2 points. You had 1 minute prep time and 1 minute and 45 seconds to complete the stage. I really like this. First of all, I'll let you guys know, if any of you have not shot big matches before, shooters are incredibly willing to help each other out for the most part. When you get really into the upper echelon of guys that are battling it out for first, second, third place, maybe you don't see them helping each other out a whole lot. But if you are a new shooter and maybe you don't know a whole lot, or you're struggling at some point, you will get help. If you ask for help, you'll get tons of help. If you don't ask for help, you may still get some help. Shooters like to share little tips and little tricks and stuff, and this bus stage was one of them. We had a squad that came off of it before us, and they pulled us aside and said, hey, look, when you set up in the bus, you're going to need to set up the seat in front of the window that you want to set on. That way you can utilize a more stable firing position off the back of the seat. And we went through, and just using that little nugget of knowledge, we went through and set up during our prep time. We got to get into the bus and see where we wanted to put our gear and where we wanted to set up and what targets we could see from what windows. So that helped out greatly. This stage, what I ended up doing, which didn't really work the greatest for me, is I took the Weebad pump pillow and I put it on my forearm again, on the rifle forearm. And then I have my regular rear bag clipped through the holes in the back of the Whiskey 3 chassis here. And I kind of utilize that to take my windowsill as the front edge of a bench and use the back of the seat as a rear spot on a bench, and tried to get a pretty stable firing position on that. What I found out doing that is the pump pillow is too tall for a bus window, and it really was jamming my scope up into the top of the window frame, which was causing some problems there. And I ended up mashing the pillow over onto the side and just getting a little bit of the pillow between the forearm and the window frame to get a more stable position, and then using that rear bag on the seat back to lock that in. It took me a little while to get my position, and every time I moved a window, it took me a little while to get that bag lined back up. If I was just using a regular forearm bag, I probably could have run that stage a little bit quicker. I don't know that I really would want to use just a bare forearm on the metal window frame. I was kind of afraid of it getting some bounce going on, because that window frame is just aluminum and the glass was broken out of it, so it really wasn't a really sturdy piece to put your forearm on. So I went through and shot that, and you start from outside the bus. On the go signal, you run in, get your position of your first window, shoot the left target, shoot the right target, next window, left target, next, left, right. 2 shots on each target before you move, and it was fairly straightforward. A couple of things. The way I set this up to engage was I had the dope dialed in for the 403 yard target, and I just held low for the closer target, the 374 yard target. We're working with 45% IPSC targets, which are fairly large targets. The skill with this one, or rather the difficulty level with this one, is moving to your different firing positions in 1 minute and 45 seconds. So maybe not necessarily hitting the target was the difficulty part. Getting from point to point and setting up a stable position so that you could hit the target. That was the difficult part with this stage. I walked away with 8 points out of the 12 total because I did time out before I could get all my shots off at the last window / firing point. But it was a really fun stage. It worked really well. One of the difficulties, though, is because you're moving through quickly and a bus has tons of nooks and crannies. I just kind of wrote off the brass that I fired for that stage, because it just rolls around under the bus seats, and you don't have time to stop and go collect all your brass at each one of these stages. You can collect what you can, but generally you just leave it and they collect it up after the match is over with or after the day is over with, and they'll go dump it up in the pavilion, and you'll spend 30-40 minutes picking through brass trying to figure out which ones are yours. Great fun time after you've worn yourself out. So if you have the ability, take old brass for your reloads and donate it to the brass gods. It'll save you some frustration. Don't do like I do and take brand new Loophole brass, because it will really eat at you when you come off a 2-day shoot and you're down 21 pieces of brass. That's like letting a $20 bill float around on the range. One thing I forgot to mention on the Copper Creek bus stage, the best finisher won a gift certificate for Copper Creek ammunition. So that was really nice of Copper Creek ammunition. So you can pick up some nice ammo, get back some of that brass that you lost. After we got done riding this short bus, we went ahead and went up to Manners Rock, which was a pile of rocks on the main range. And I'll read you the stage briefing here. Engage 10 rounds from a hasty firing position. On command, move from the start position to a rock and engage 5 circle targets with 1 round each. Engage from left to right on the circle target rack, whether you hit or miss. Once the shooter has engaged the first 5 rounds, he must change rocks and establish another firing position and engage the target rack again in the same manner. Do not load until you are in your first firing position. Move with bolt open and back during the stage. Gas guns move with weapon on safe. The target rack is designated as A5 at 735 yards. Each plate was a 12-inch circle. The Manners Rock stage is fairly straightforward. On the tune-up day, we got to go out and we got to shoot from various different positions on the rock, and we got to shoot at the plate rack that was out there. So really, we should have been dialed in. We should have been good to go on it. My problem was I went up there, when I stepped back, when I shot it at the tune-up, I found the positions I liked. I shot off the positions I liked. I decided, okay, you know, if this stage is the way we're going to go, this is how I'm going to shoot it. Well, I stood back and I watched a bunch of other guys go through this stage before it was my turn to go, and I was watching the positions that they were firing from. And for some reason, I let it get into my head and I decided to change my plan and decided to shoot from the positions that they were firing from, thinking that those would be more stable positions than the ones that I had picked out. Well, they may be more stable firing positions, but the problem was I had already shot from the positions that I had picked out. I already knew how to set up my rifle and where my bipod needed to be and where my rear bag needed to be on the rock for those positions that I had pre-selected. I didn't know how my specific rifle needed to be set up to shoot the positions that these other guys selected, and you only had 2 minutes to complete the stage, including the move. So you didn't have a lot of time to goof around in there. And it really turned around and bit me. I don't like changing my plan in the middle, and it really didn't work out for me. I was banging those same plates on the tune-up with no problem, and I went out and shot this, and I got a 0, got a goose egg on it. Because I changed my plan, I didn't execute it the way I had already planned to execute it. Part of it may have been mental. It may have been after the first couple of shots I was getting frustrated and I was rushing shots. I wasn't stopping, rebuilding my position, getting locked in, and getting good to go. But whatever it was, it bit me, and I think I would have done a whole lot better if I stuck with the positions that I had already planned beforehand and I had already practiced from. To use. Now, going back, the next time I shoot, I will look at the positions that the top runners used, and I will practice from those positions and see if those help me out, if those are any better. Once I have time to get the gun dialed in, get the bipod height right, and get good to go. But the way these rocks were positioned on some of these spots, it was really difficult to get your bipod set up and have the rifle in a place where the rear and the front was supported equally and you weren't running into interference problems anywhere else on the rifle. So that's really something that you need to practice from. And sometimes practicing just from unsteady positions at home or from strange barricades and obstacles at home will help you out. And sometimes you just really need to get a good position on the obstacle that you're going to use in the match to be able to get dialed in. From the Manners Rock, we moved over to the Mover Evolution stage. And there was a little bit of a change because at some point one of the K&M movers went down, so we were left with only one mover. It ended up really being a pretty straightforward run. You just simply had to expend 10 rounds at the 500-yard mover during 2 passes of the mover. And it was a 10-hit circle. You had 20 points possible, 2 points for each hit. They did tell us that they changed the speed of the mover a little bit. When we practiced the mover from 500 yards on the tune-up, I was running about a 1.5 mil lead, which is kind of a standard lead. If you don't know what your lead is on a walking target, start out with 1.5 mils and then fine-tune from there. 1.5 is what I usually shoot, and that's what we were hitting on day one. They told us they slowed it down a little bit though, so I ended up using about somewhere between a 1.3 and a 1.4 mil lead, and that seemed to be appropriate for me. And I managed 4 hits out of the 10 shots, so I came off of that with 8 points. I really would have liked to have got a little fewer more points, but I think at that point, again, I was getting a little tired, my attention was drifting a little bit, and I wasn't tracking as smoothly. When I engage moving targets, I track. Quite a few other guys prefer the ambush method where they'll jump out ahead of it, and then when the target breaks that 1.5 mil lead, they'll trigger the shot, or whatever lead you're using, they'll trigger the shot. I prefer to try to track along the target. That was working for me greatly on the tune-up. I was just banging that mover on the tune-up. I just, whatever reason, wasn't tracking as smoothly on the Mover Evolution stage, and every now and again I would drop one in front or drop one behind because I had a little bit of a stutter as I broke the trigger. So shooting moving targets is something, there's only one way to get better at it, and that's shooting moving targets. Once we got done with the Mover Evolution, we went ahead and shot the K&M Hustle, which we went ahead and shot that from the exact same position. The K&M Hustle was engaged 13 rounds from the prone position. On command, engage the M2 mover with 5 rounds. Then engage and hit B1, then engage and hit B2, then engage and hit B3, then engage the M2 mover again with remaining rounds until time expires. Each stationary target must be hit before the shooter may move on to the next target. Shooters will not load until they're in their firing position. So you had to engage the mover first, and then you had to engage targets in succession, and the target sizes are 250 yards, 45% IPSC, 375 yard, 45% IPSC, and 425 yard, 45% IPSC. And the mover was the 500 yard, 10-inch circle on the mover. So the mover started, you'd start engaging the mover. You engage the mover with 5 rounds, then you hit B1, B2, B3, and then with whatever you got left, you shoot at the mover again. They gave you a one minute prep time, and then you had 2 passes of the mover to make all your shots. So when they said go, they started the mover, and you had until the mover crossed and back to make all your hits. Very, very challenging because you really had to decide how you were going to do this, if you were going to dial for each stage. I really prefer to dial for a mover, and if I'm going to hold for anything else, then I'll do negative holds for all the rest of it. On this, I actually went ahead and I dialed for everything. I ended up getting 2 hits on the mover and 2 hits on stationary targets before I timed out. So I walked away with 6 points total. But my suggestion, anytime you have to do something like this, is set it up so you dial for the mover, and the mover, you have the dope dialed in for that mover so the mover is on your regular horizontal stadia line. This makes it a whole lot easier to hold for it because you have demarcations that will correspond to exactly where the mover's at. You're not trying to hold over and pay attention to where those lead marks are to track it. And then you can either dial for everything else, or like I said, you can, in this case, you would have had to do a negative hold. Now the drawback is the H59 reticle here only has a 1 mil tick mark on the negative vertical stadia line, so you really can't do accurate negative holds on it. You really have to do only positive holds. So I went ahead and just dialed for this and didn't really have a problem with time, but you have to be fast when you're dialing for various targets like this on a stage like this. Now after we get done with the mover stages, again we had a lunch break. We got to cool down and enjoy that lunch provided by Bartlein barrels, and pack some water in, and then once lunch was done and everything was packed up, everybody got split back up and sent on their ways again. And we got briefed on the Silencer Company shoot house attack. Now this is the shoot house stage, and it really was one of the most complex stages that we had to shoot. It was sponsored by Silencer Company, and again this has a really long drawn out briefing. So I'm just going to go ahead and condense it a little bit for you. But on K&M Shoot House there are 2 upper decks, and the way we started on this was you went up to the top deck, and Silencer Company had provided a 300 blackout silence bolt gun. Really nice setup. With that bolt gun you were given 1 shot, and you had to engage the C1 target, which was at 200 yards. The rifle was already zeroed, it was already dialed in for that. All you had to do was put the crosshairs on the silhouette and ding it. Now once you made your hit with the bolt gun, you had to make your way down to the second deck where Silencer Company had a suppressed carbine, an AR-15, waiting for you. Now you had 5 rounds available, and you had to make 1 hit on that same C1 target with that rifle. Now here's kind of the trick with this. 300 blackout, subsonic with a suppressor on it. That bullet takes a little while to get to the 200-yard line, hit that target, and then for that sound to come back. And you only had 1 shot from the bolt gun, so hit or miss, there was no reason to stay on the bolt gun and look down range and inspect your target. What I did is I got up there, and as soon as they gave me the fire command, I went ahead and launched that bullet. As soon as I launched the bullet, I ripped the action open, jumped up, and ran down to the second deck and scooped up that carbine. The AR-15 was set up, loaded, hot, with the safety on. So all you had to do is pick it up, safety off. I went ahead and got my shot with that, and then you run all the way back down to the first deck where your rifle was standing by between a set of cones. Once you got to your rifle, you picked it up, you loaded it, and then went into the shoot house. And there were ports cut in the shoot house, and at each port you had to engage down range, and there were ports that were high like windows, and there were ports that were really low like vents almost down on the ground. This one you had to have 16 rounds for your rifle. You were going to shoot from each port. Every port you had to engage targets downrange. It was the C5 target at 500 yards, which was a 3/4 IPSC target. Here's what I'm going to tell you on this, something I learned very dearly. Make sure you read the briefing again, and then read it a 3rd time. And make sure you know how many magazines that you need to go into a stage with. Because for this stage, I need to fire 16 rounds through my bolt gun. 1 10-round magazine is not enough to complete a 16-round stage. So I ran downstairs, scooped up my rifle, grabbed my magazine out of my mag holder on my belt, slapped it in, went to town, started engaging that target, felt pretty good about what I was doing until I locked the bolt closed and went click and went into 100% brain lock. I ran the bolt again, thinking I didn't pick up a round, click, and then it dawned on me, and I ripped it open and dumped my mag and looked, and there's an empty magazine, and there was no magazine on my side. So I gave up at least 8 targets on that stage just simply because I was stupid and didn't bring the second magazine. So make sure you double check on what's going on. Now at this point, I already had sealed my fate on where my finish was going to be in the whole match. So it's not something where I'm going to throw my rifle down and stomp around and cry and bitch and moan about. I screwed up. It really didn't make a vast difference in my outcome. So I just went ahead, collected my stuff, told the RO, I'm out, I'm done. Even though I had plenty of time left, that was it. Scooped up my magazine, stepped out, and ended that stage. And I came off of the shoot house. Actually, I didn't even write down how many points I came off the shoot house with because I was so not worried about it. So that one was kind of a bummer because I gave away easy points that if I had paid attention, I wouldn't have. So let that be a lesson to you. Carry a spare magazine. Even if you only need one magazine for the run, it may be a good idea to carry a second magazine on you in case you have some problems with that magazine, or you start messing around trying to clear a jam and you eject rounds out of the magazine. It's a whole lot easier to dump that mag, drop a new mag in, and go with a fresh magazine instead of trying to fumble around and get magazines back or rounds back into your magazine under time. So just a word of advice, learn from my mistakes. Don't be that guy that shows up with too few magazines to actually run the stage. The absolute last stage on the K&M Precision PRS match was the holdover stage. That was the last stage that I shot. Again, guys are on different squads, shot these in different orders. The holdover stage was engage 8 shots from the prone position. On command, engage the C4, C5, C7, and C8 square targets with 2 rounds each. Targets must be engaged from closest to furthest. Hit or miss, the shooter will then transition to the next target after 2 rounds. Each hit scores points. Shooters are not allowed to touch their scope in any manner after their first shot. Shooters cannot skip targets or shoot them out of order. Violations will result in stage disqualification. Your first target was 400 yards, 10-inch square, 500 yards, 12-inch square, 700 yards, 16-inch square, and 800 yards, 18-inch square. So relatively generous targets. Each hit was worth 2 points, and you have 1 minute and 45 seconds to complete the stage. Now, this stage, we shoot holdover stages back home all the time. I just run with the scope on 0, and I use the mill scale that's in the horse reticle, or any of my other rifle scopes have the mill scale in them. It's relatively easy to quickly get your holds. The key thing with holdover stages is don't forget the wind. Make sure you're still making wind calls. Make sure you're still holding for wind. It's so easy to get wound up in where you need to place the reticle to get that elevation right that guys will forget about the wind component. I didn't do too bad on this one. It's a fairly straightforward stage. Again, we're shooting prone, bagged rear rifle. You had plenty of time, 1 minute and 45 seconds for 8 rounds, and I came off the stage with 10 out of 16 points. So I ended on a fairly good note. Didn't do too bad at all. Overall, out of the match, I placed 61st out of about 100 shooters. So it was a lower half finish, which I really, it's the worst finish that I've had at a tactical rifle match in a very long time. But it was well deserved. I made a bunch of errors. I screwed up some things that I really shouldn't have screwed up. I made some stupid mistakes. But it's all stuff that I can learn from and I can move forward. The biggest thing is I had a ton of fun at this match. Got to go out, shoot with some friends. Got to meet some new friends, and everybody there was just really good to go. K&M is an incredibly professionally run place. A really, really nice facility, and if you have the chance to go down there and train, I highly suggest you do so. If you have the chance to go down there and shoot a match, really do so. Win, lose, place, wherever you go, go down there and shoot. You will definitely learn something, and everybody is incredibly willing to help you out. Now, even though I didn't finish exactly where I wanted to, still came away with some really nice prizes. The prize that I picked up on my first run through the prize table was a little bastard Gen 2 brake from APA. It's a really slick little brake, and I'm looking forward to testing this out. Basically what it is it's threaded 5/8-24 for 308 rifles, and that's actually what the 6.5 here is threaded for, or the 260 here. So you can take this guy, and there's a jam nut on the back of it, and you can just screw it in until it bottoms out, and then you can dial that jam nut back to make sure it's clocked where it needs to be. Throw a wrench on there and just snug it down, and you're good to go. You don't need to have a gunsmith install this thing. It is bored for 30 caliber, but that really shouldn't be a problem. The brake we have on here right now is bored for 30 caliber. So I'm really looking forward to getting this on a rifle and trying it out. You know, there were a ton of prizes on the table: rifles, chassis, suppressors, all kinds of stuff. Doing a 61st place finish and coming away with a $150, $120, somewhere around there, dollar break is a hell of a lot better than a poke an eye with a sharp stick. So there was a massive, massive amount of prizes on the table. In fact, so much so that after all of the finishers went through, and the way K&M does it is the way I've seen most precision rifle matches do it, where they will simply call your shooter number or call your name, and you go through the prize table and pick what you want in order of finish. Once they had called all the finishers, there was still a ton of stuff on the prize table, and at that point they put the ROs through and let them pick stuff off the prize table, and then it was pretty much just a free-for-all. And on that pass through, I ended up picking up a Bell & Carlson, a loading block, which you guys have seen me use these before. This is another nice CNC aluminum machined block that's sized for 308 class cases. So it will find a place of honor on my loading bench with the other Bell & Carlson blocks. A couple other things. Well, I picked up a nice little pouch from Armageddon Gear here. That'll go nice on my war belt, just a general GP pouch. And Silencer Co. provided these really slick Write and Rain notebooks. So you can use it as a range diary, as whatever you want. And they've got product information in the first couple of pages, but the rest of it are nice lined and gridded pages to let you scribble down whatever you want to scribble down. And everybody in their shooter goodie bags got a nice little target from JC Steel Targets. And JC Steel Targets makes some really, really great steel. We've got a bunch of these now from our local shooting group, so I'm sure we will see these sitting down there. And these are a pain in the butt to hit because they're so narrow crosswise. You got to really make sure you get your wind call good to hit them. So they are some fun little targets, and you can hang them from whatever. You can go get a shepherd's hook from Lowe's and hang them off that if you want, or hang them from some fire hose. So overall, the match was definitely a win. We're going to go ahead and throw up a slide here at the end to show you who the top 10 finishers were, because I don't have my score sheet sitting here in front of me. And we're also going to throw up a sheet with all of the sponsors for the match. Again, this was a very, very fun match to shoot. It was great. I loved it. We stayed at the Holiday Inn that was recommended to us by K&M, and it was a great facility. Had a pool, had a jacuzzi that we used quite often. So really great. That and the fact that it was located right next to a Hooters didn't hurt either, because they've got great food, right? Anyway, if you guys get a chance to shoot K&M, I highly suggest it. The K&M Precision Rifle Series match was a ton of fun, and hopefully we'll be back again next year to shoot that match. K&M does have the Gap Grind Pro-Am coming up, hosted by GA Precision and Bushnell. So if you're interested at shooting at K&M, make sure you go down there and check that out. That's coming up towards the end of this year. We've got information on that up on our website. We will also have a write-up for K&M on the website here hopefully within the next week or so. So keep your eyes open for that. I hope you've liked this video. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below, or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you've liked it, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It helps us out greatly. And until next time, no matter if it's at your local range or at a national level competition, get out and shoot.